Hello, friends. This is Worm, according to your high school girlfriend. And today I wanted to talk about conditional finality and whether or not it needs a nerf. But before we get into it, there's a lot of y'all who are not subscribed, so go down there, hit the sub button. I'd love to have you be a part of our content, such as discussions and conversations, stuff like that. So do that right now. And now let's talk about conditional finality, which conditional finality, if you are any sort of PvP veteran, you know this thing is very, very popular in the Crucible right now. And today I wanted to take a look at what it is, why it is so why it's used so much, and of course, whether or not it needs a nerf, right? So I want to start off, of course, what is it? It is the raid exotic weapon for Root of Nightmares. It came in with Lightfall. It is a very interesting and unique shotgun, okay? And there's a lot of things that make it unique. Number one, it's double barrel, okay? So it only has 2 shells in the magazine at any given time, which that is what it is. Like, that's pretty neat. That's not what makes it special, though. Or that's not what makes it so special in the Crucible. In the Crucible, the highlights of the weapon are the fact that it has incredibly high handling for an aggressive frame shotgun. Because even though it is a double barrel shotgun, it is still like class kind of in the same archetype as aggressive frame shotguns, right? It does the same amount of damage and stuff like that. And it has very high handling for this archetype, which is a huge draw to people. Like, people could look at the handling stat and say, hey, I like that just because of the handling stat, right? That's one of the biggest draws of it. Of course, its exotic perk allows you to freeze targets. It allows you to cause ignitions. Like, we'll talk a little bit more about those in just a second. But it overall is just a really neat, really fun, and of course, unique, dare I say, exotic shotgun in the game. And the reason why it is so used, I think it's, there are some direct reasons why it's used. The high handling, for example. We just talked about the high handling. That is a direct reason why it's used. But I think there's also some indirect reasons why it's used, okay? Number one, let's point out the obvious. Antaeus Wards exists, right? Antaeus Wards exists. Antaeus Wards is a shotgun lover's dream, right? You run around for like half a second or a second and a half, something like that. I can't remember exactly how long. You get the reflective vents active. Then when you slide, you are completely invulnerable to damage from the front, and it pairs wonderfully with shotguns, right? Because you slide into somebody with your shotgun and kill them. Conditional Finality and Antaeus Wards, they're just made for each other, right? Like, high handling, very fun shotguns, got this exotic feel to it. Antaeus Wards' existence as they are currently is one of the reasons why we see this weapon so high up on the usage charts, right? And that's something that we can't ignore. Now, of course, next week, which I believe the mid-season update is coming next week. Next week, we will see Antaeus Wards drop off because they are getting a pretty substantial nerf. Will that change the needle? No, though. I don't really think so. And we'll talk about why, some of the other reasons why, it's so widely used, I guess, and what makes it so popular in just a second. But yeah, Antaeus Ward's simple existence brings this up so much in value. It brings all shotguns up in value, but especially Conditional Finality. Now, another very, very important thing to remember is we are currently in a meta with some of the best energy weapons we've ever seen. Okay, we just got Igneous Hammer this season, right? And Igneous Hammer is an absolute monster of a hand cannon. It is so very good. Players out here have the adept god rolls and stuff, and they are fantastic. I mean, the thing's smacking from like 50 meters or something crazy like that, right? So besides Igneous, we have things like Amit. Like, Amit is insanely good right now, due to its perks and stuff like that. In fact, I think on the trials report, the top 3 weapons are Igneous, or Conditional Finality at the very top, Igneous Hammer, and then Amit right under that. So, I mean, when you have such fierce weapons in the energy slots, legendary weapons in the energy slot, your exotic slot is kind of open to either heavy, which, let's be honest, I don't think anybody uses heavy inside of, especially something like trials. I don't know why you'd use a heavy exotic when you can put on something like Conditional Finality, right? Conditional Finality, it's got really not anywhere near the competition that the energy slot has, right? So the energy slot having such beastly weapons is something that does need to be considered when considering how many people are using Conditional Finality. But let's move on to the real reasons, right? The real reason why this weapon is used so much is because it is the best weapon at countering supers. And that's not even that's not even a secret. That's not even, a question, right? It's wildly good at handling supers. You can literally freeze any super right there on the spot and then clean them up with a melee, punch them, and they're done, right? That is a big deal. And especially in trials where people are gravitating towards these really fast charging supers such as bubble and well, this is a big deal, right? And this is kind of where the whole debate of is it overpowered or not comes in. So of course there's overpowered and overused, right? Something Centrifuge. Okay, Centrifuge last season was in every single game. You had like 3 or 4 or 5 people using it literally in every single game you played. In sixes, you know, in even in trials, it was there a lot. Does that mean Centrifuge is OP? No, absolutely not. It's not overpowered. It's overused, right? And overused is not the same thing as overpowered. And we've seen that before in Destiny. You know, Ace of Spades. Ace of Spades is overused. Is it overpowered though? No, I wouldn't say so. Not by a lot, not by any means, right? So that begs the question, Conditional Finality, is it overused or is it overpowered? And I think it's kind of in a spot where it's a little bit more overused than it is actually overpowered. And the reason why it's overused and why people say it's overpowered is because of the number of Well of Radiances and bubbles in Trials of Osiris. Because let's be real, if you're playing Titan or you're playing Warlock and you're not using bubble or well, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage, right? Because you can get those supers charged up insanely fast. You can run in, you can put them on a point. When you put it down, you make orbs for your teammates so that they can get their bubbles and wells. And next thing you know, the enemy team can't do anything about it because it's a bubble. Like, what are you supposed to do about a bubble? There's one thing you can do though, right? That is use Conditional Finality. Conditional Finality can one-shot, you know, it can freeze a Titan in the bubble and you can clean them up with a punch. Same thing with the Warlock. You can freeze a Warlock in a well and then punch the Warlock and it will kill them. Right now, of course, Well Radiant's a little bit more difficult to pull off than the bubble, because the bubble, you know, as soon as the bubble's gone, or as soon as the Titan dies, the bubble's gone, you know, and so everybody else is kind of left with their, you know, caught with their pants down, so to speak. But it makes me question, like, is this video really a question of whether or not Conditional Finality is overpowered, or is it more of a question of is the bubble and the Well of Radiance overpowered? Because I guarantee you, with you know 100% certainty that if, say, Dominion was not the game mode, if Bungie went back to a Trials game mode where it was literally just kill the enemies, right, kill or be killed, Conditional Finality would not see nearly as much usage as it does currently. Because Conditional Finality, like I said, is the only counter to these insanely fast charging supers, like the bubble, like the well, you know, and it's still risky, right? Like if a Titan runs in, it's a 4-4 round, you know, in Trials, a Titan runs down, puts his bubble in, you have one shot to slide, you know, run in there, slide in there, whatever you want to do, take the shotgun shot, freeze him, punch him, and then delete the bubble, risking your own life because of, you know, other, you know, counter shotguns, blah, 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 whatever it is. Like, it's definitely a risky weapon, but it is one that can handle supers. And I think that is the reason why it is so popular in Trials of Osiris, aside from the fact that you can pair it with things like Ignis Hammer, which is just insanely good. Ignis Hammer is absolutely fantastic. So that's the reason why it's overused. And I don't necessarily think that the Conditional Finality is broken by any means. And you think about it, because I know there's two sides of this, right? There's the side where, you know, you use Conditional Finality to kill a super, right? To kill a bubble user, for example. And your thought, you know, whenever I slide in, I kill a bubble, you know, with Conditional Finality, I think, oh, thank God I had Conditional Finality and I was able to challenge that bubble. You know, like I know that this dude, all he was going to do was put the bubble down and just stand in it until he capped the flag, right? That's one of the reasons I don't like Dominion. That's one of the reasons I don't like supers, to be completely level with y'all. But that's aside from the point. If I get a kill with Conditional Finality, I am thankful. I'm like, oh, thank God, like, you know, they didn't win this round just because they're patient and they can just sit on a point. That's not fun. That's not entertaining. And Conditional Finality kind of solves that problem. But on the other hand, if I'm in, you know, and it's almost, hold on, before we go on the other hand, it's almost like, hey, like, I'm glad I had Conditional Finality equipped, because this scrubby bubble user was literally just about to put it down and play the most scaredy cat way of standing in his bubble till he capped the flag. And I hate that. Like, that's frustrating that players can win rounds based strictly on supers, right? And not just any supers, like the fact that you can put a super down that charges insanely fast on a point and just stand there, like that should not happen. That should not be okay. And I really hope that these discussions help Bungie to, realize that, hey, this is an issue and we need to look into what we can do about it. Because this whole thing with tiered supers and whatnot, I don't think it works in trials, right? And that's a discussion for another time, but let's move back to conditional finality. Let's say you're on the other end, you're the bubble user that gets killed by conditional finality. It is frustrating. It's like, man, I used my super, blah, 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 and I got killed right out of super, and that's not fair, and it's OP, blah, blah, blah. Like, I think both sides, like, have a good argument, like, have a understandable argument, right? Not necessarily good on either side, but like as a bubble user, it would be frustrating to die because I have a super. I just use my super. I should be able to win the game because of this super, right? And then vice versa, as the conditional finality user, it's like, hey, this isn't fair that they have a super because he has a subclass equipped that my team doesn't have, and he can just stand there, right? So I think in the end, it's the reason why conditional finality is so popular is because it can handle these particular supers. Right. And really, it's not a matter of whether or not conditional finality is OP. I think it's more of a question of, is the bubble and is the well OP? Because if you took supers completely out of the equation, let's be honest, how many people would probably stop using conditional finality? Not everyone, but there's a good number of people, right? Because I know for me personally, the only reason I would slap on conditional finality is because somebody has a bubble or somebody has a well. Right? I'm not a big shotgun fan. You can watch the gameplay in the background. It speaks for itself. I'm not a big shotgun user. I'm not a huge shotgun fan. I don't perform great when I put on a shotgun and just run at people. But that is, that's kind of the question. Now, the next thing, the players, the next argument I've heard people saying about, conditional finality is OP is because it can kill supers for basically nothing. That is just wrong. That is factually inaccurate. It cannot just kill players because of nothing. Mind you, conditional finality is still a shotgun. Okay, it is still a shotgun, and it has very, very bad range. It has really a pretty bad pellet spread, especially for that first shell. It's a triangle shape, right? That's not good by any means in the Crucible. So when you're sitting here saying, oh, well, it's OP because it can destroy supers, why not talk about nerfing aggressive frame snipers, right? Or high impact frame snipers that can one-shot people out of super? Well, because there's an element of skill involved. I mean, I would argue there's an element of skill involved with using conditional finality, right? You have to be able to close the gap on somebody, and you get one shot to make it work. If there is a Striker Titan running around with Fist of Havoc active, and they're coming at me, and I'm running at them with conditional finality, I'm like, here we go, we're about to go toe to toe. I have one shot to freeze them and then punch them or shoot them again or whatever it is that I'm going to do before I am toast, right? And I think at that point, it's not even a 50-50. It's like a 25-75, right? I have a 25% chance of winning that fight with a super. Because Fist of Havoc, just as an example, can dash out of the way. It can do its heavy slam that kills me. That kills me before I even get close enough. Like, there are a lot of things, and that is. Oh, time out here. Hold on, we're having technical difficulties. There we go. Sorry guys, I had a little bit of a hiccup there. But the heavy slam that can kill me before I even get close enough to potentially get the kill. Right? I mean, there's a lot of factors that go on, and that's Fist of Havoc. That's a melee based super. Take something like Silk Strike, where they can hit you from a range, right? Like, that's where things get difficult. Or something like Nova Warp, where they can blink all over the place. It is very difficult to kill somebody who's in super just with one shell of a shotgun. So everybody's saying, oh, it's overpowered because it kills supers by nothing. Like, I would go as far to argue that the player that killed you using conditional finality is probably just better. I've put conditional finality on my hunter. I've gone invis, and I've literally sat in a spot because I hear somebody pop their super. I hear a Hammer Titan pop his super, and I know he's coming. So I'm invis. I'm sitting in the corner with conditional finality. I run out and I kill him. Who is that? Me that's being a scrub for camping with a shotgun that's a free kill, right? Or is that on the Titan for running in headstrong, thinking that he's invincible? I would argue, because obviously I'm a little biased here, but I would argue that, if you are worried about getting killed out of super because of a shotgun, I wouldn't say that's an imbalance. I would say that's a reasonable thing to be afraid of, right? Like the existence of conditional finality puts so many supers a little bit more in check. That's what Fallout said in his videos the other day, right? Especially the bubble and the well. It keeps them in check. That's why I personally don't think that it needs a nerf. Right? I really don't think that it needs a nerf. I think that it's fine where it is. It's got very low range for a shotgun. It's got high handling. That's a trade-off, high handling, low range. But I think that where it is right now is a perfectly fine spot for it to be. And if you're worried about, oh, well, it can kill supers instantly. I mean, seriously, look at aggressive frame snipers that can one bang supers, with a headshot, right? Like what makes those less OP? Right? Well, it's the fact that you have to be at a distance, you have to actually hit your shots. I mean, I would argue with conditional finality, it's the same thing. If you're using Nova Warp, how difficult is it to dodge bullets in Nova Warp? It's not. It's not difficult at all. You can literally blink right behind the person that's charging you down with a shotgun and kill them. You could probably charge it up as you see them running at you and then do the burst and it'll kill them before they even get to you, right? So again, if you're dying frequently by supers, to conditional finality, or if you're in super and you're dying frequently to conditional finality, maybe it's time to reevaluate. Supers, while they are great and they're good and they're strong, they're not meant to be a kill switch, right? They're not meant to be activated and just turn your brain off and go do whatever the heck you want, right? Like that's not what they're supposed to be. They're supposed to be something that gives you a slight advantage over, a strong advantage, a power fantasy advantage over other players, but they still have to be counterable. Like literally imagine, think about, what was it? Trampled Titan way back in the day when One-Eyed Mask was a thing. That right there was an absolute nightmare, right? Conditional finality would have been great back then, right? Because you could literally have a super that lasts for 40, 50 seconds and get health back constantly. Right. And like, that's what I'm talking about when I say, that is a turn off your brain super. I don't think that's a good spot for supers to be. And I think supers, again, they should be powerful, but they shouldn't be so powerful that you just turn your brain off and do what you want. If you get killed by conditional finality and you're inside of a bubble, like that's, I'm sorry to tell you, but that's kind of almost a you had it coming moment. You should have done some things differently. You should have put a wall down, for example. You should have, got in your bubble, put it down, and then got out of it if you know they're using conditional finality. And we've talked about this before, so I'm not going to go into all this detail. But yeah, I don't know. In terms of conditional finality, though, I don't think that it's OP by any means. I think that even with, nerfs to the bubbles and stuff like that, it's not OP. Right? It keeps supers a little bit in check, and it does a niche thing very well. It is a very good super killer, and that's what it does. It doesn't do anything better than Felwinter's Lie or especially like Matador. Like a God Roll Matador is, in my opinion, infinitely better than conditional finality in a case by, not case by case, in a general situation. But when it comes to a super, conditional finality is better because it can freeze supers, it can ignite supers, blah, 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 blah. Anyways, look, we've talked for like 20 minutes almost about this. I don't think it needs to be nerfed. I presented my arguments as to why. I want to hear your thoughts though. Do you think it needs to be nerfed? And if you do, tell me your reasons why it does. Like I do not think that it is a free super killer. And I want to make sure to stress this very, very hard. It is not a free super killer. You still have to be mindful. If you have any kind of range super, it doesn't work. If you have a super that is fast moving, erratic, like Nova Warp, like Fist of Havoc, it's very difficult to use. It's not a free super kill. It's just not. But yeah, anyways, tell me your thoughts in the comments about conditional finality. Do you think it needs nerf? Do you think it's fine where it is? And tell me your thoughts on the well and the bubble too. Do you think those need a nerf in Trials of Osiris? Of course, if you liked today's video, drop a like. It helps the channel out a lot. Subscribe for more daily Destiny content. And do me a favor, watch the videos you see on the end screen because for whatever reason, YouTube thinks you will like them. Ladies and gentlemen, I will see y'all tomorrow. Bye for now, guys.